Hello, and welcome to Love at First Sight, or How to Adjust Quickly to an Organ. My name is Korndörfer. I direct the organ program at Georgia State University. As organists, we often have to perform on instruments that we have never seen before, especially for competitions and auditions. Now, often in these situations, we are faced with the additional challenge that we get only very limited rehearsal time or preparation time on the instrument before these important moments in our career. I realized that there are two different approaches to these situations when I was a student at the Paris Conservatory. I was asked to be the page turner for the semifinals of the Paris organ competition, where the contestants had to perform a 50-minute program and had only 2 hours of prep time on the instrument. Not very much for a very challenging repertoire. Now, what I noticed was that there were two different groups of contestants. One that arrived on the instrument, discovered the instrument, experimented a little bit with the stops, and then tried to set the registrations for the pieces. And they quickly ran out of time and didn't have the time to actually play through the music. The other group had prepared in advance. They actually just quickly set their stops and then ran through the program. Now, if you ask me, I prefer to be in that second group. I would like to have time to play through my repertoire before I have to perform for a jury in a competition or audition. What can you do to make sure you are in that second group? I believe that information is key. You need to find as much information about the instrument that you're going to perform on in advance as you can. I don't just mean the stop list, but I mean many other things that are accessible online, or you can send emails to the organizing committee or the university and ask them for that information. Maybe you also have friends that have performed on that instrument and that can help you out. For example, what about the combination system? Who made it? How does it work? Do you need an access code? All of these are things that you can find in the manual of that combination system, which is usually accessible online. You also should know how many memory levels the instrument has and how many you're going to get. How many generals and divisionals and toe studs are on the instrument? How many are you going to get? It's a very important piece of information because you want to plan accordingly. The second thing is layout of the instrument. I mean not only the console, but also the organ itself. For example, layout of the console. Where are the stops located? Especially in a larger instrument like the one that we have here, it is very helpful to know in advance that the grade is on the upper right, whereas the pedal is on the upper left. You don't want to waste your time searching for the principal 8 in the grade. Another thing is the order of manuals. Is it the standard American way, meaning choir, grade, swell, solo? Or is it French, meaning grade, positive, swell? Or is there a French manual transfer that actually allows you to switch? What about the placement of the pistons? Are they in the same places that you're used to from your practice organ, or are they somewhere else? Is there a next and previous button or a sequencer that allows you to cycle through the generals or not? If you rely on that and it is not there, you should practice doing it only by hitting the generals and divisionals. What about swell shoes and enclosed divisions? How many do you have? If it's a large instrument, you can find yourself with a lot of swell shoes, and if you're used to having only 1 or 2 at your practice organ, it can be quite confusing and not all that easy to find the right ones when you have very limited time. And finally, the layout of the organ itself. Are the divisions on the same level or are they on different levels? For example, here at First Presbyterian Church, we have the swell, grade and choir on the main level and the solo and positive on the upper level. Why does that matter? Well, simply because those divisions that are placed higher speak directly into the room and are quite present in the room, but they pass over you at the console. You hear them much less, whereas those that are lower and closer to you are louder at the console and not quite that loud in the room. That means when you prepare your registrations, you have to keep that in mind and remember that the positive, even though it may sound a little bit soft where you are, will probably be fine in the room, whereas the choir or swell, in the case of this organ here, sound very loud here, but much less out in the room. You want to keep that in mind when you set your registrations. What about the pedalboard? Is it the standard AGO pedalboard that we find on many instruments on this continent, or is it a European straight pedalboard? If it is a straight flat pedalboard, that completely changes the mechanics of your pedal technique. And it is not that easy to adjust to that if you have never seen that before. So you want to make sure you know in advance whether it's a kind of pedalboard that you're used to or not. And then finally, what type of action does the instrument feature? Is it an EP or is it a mechanical action organ? If it is mechanical or tracker action, there can be different types. Some of them are very light and sensitive. You basically barely look at the keys and they start playing already. Or some of them can be quite heavy, especially when you couple several manuals together. If you're not used to playing on a heavy tracker organ, it can be quite tiring for your muscles unless you prepare for that in advance. What you can do is, for example, to play on a piano that has a heavier action and do things like Hannon or Czerny exercises that are really designed to build your muscles. If you do that for a while, you should be fine because you develop stronger muscles and you will be able to deal with the heavy tracker action, even though on the organ you usually play on something that is much lighter than that. Why is it important to gather all of that information? Well, because it allows you to prepare for the situation that you're going to face in the audition or competition. A lot of what we do is muscle memory. I don't only mean that we have to develop the muscle memory for playing the right notes, but the whole console management is part of that as well. Meaning, do you have to move up or down with manual changes? Do you have to push pistons in the middle of the keyboard or on the side of the keyboard? Where do you have to hit a toe stud? All of this is something that you practice again and again and again, and you get used to doing certain things in a certain way. You don't have to think about them anymore. They happen automatically. Now, if your muscle memory is programmed in a certain way that works on your organ but doesn't work on the organ that you play in the competition or audition, you have a big problem. Most likely, you will not really manage to adjust that quickly, and even if you do, you will focus mostly on those different changes rather than focusing on making music. So what you should do is you should prepare during your practice for the different setup that you will find on the audition organ. Meaning, even if your grade is on the second manual, but the audition organ has it on the first manual, always play with the grade as if it were on the first manual. Just get used to moving up to get to the positive rather than moving down. If you are used to hitting a piston that is on the far left of the organ, but in reality you will need to hit something that is in the center, try to prepare for that by always hitting something there. You can put post-its on the organ. Check with the organist of that church before you do that make sure he or she is okay with that, so that you have some kind of visual help that will allow you to direct your hand or your finger to the right spot. Same with the swell shoes. Try to always move your foot to the swell shoe to about the placement where the swell shoe is going to be on the organ where you have to perform. I also recommend that you try to find an organ by the same builder or with a similar layout in your area. For example, if you usually practice on a 2-manual instrument, you're going to have a 4-manual instrument for the audition. It makes a lot of sense to look around in your area and to find a 4-manual instrument or at least a 3-manual instrument that will allow you to practice more closely to what you will have to do in the audition than on your standard practice instrument. Call around, ask colleagues and friends, and usually they should be open to allowing you to come in at least a couple of times to spend time on the instrument to prepare for this important situation in your life. The other thing that you can do with the information that you have learned in advance is prepare your registrations. And with preparing registrations, I don't mean that you just think, well, I'm going to do a plenum for Bach. We all know that that's what we're going to do. I mean that you write down which stops you're going to use for that plenum. Talk to your teacher. Ask what he or she thinks on this instrument, that is what you should do. What about the pedal? What should balance? You can never know exactly, but if you have something written down that you can quickly pull and then check, that saves you a lot of time rather than just looking at the organ and trying to find out what you could do the day off. Same thing for crescendi. If you play romantic music, try to map them out exactly and write into your score, or write on a sheet of paper rather, measure 22, you're going to add those stops. Measure 23, those stops. Whatever it is that the piece requires, have it all planned out. For solo registrations, I recommend that you actually have several prepared in advance and then try to see which one sounds best. You never know whether the oboe or the French horn will sound better for a particular passage, so be open to possible changes there. When you plan your registrations, you should also try to keep in mind to use as much of the organ as possible. You don't want to make a large 4-manual instrument sound like a 2-manual organ with 20 stops. If you have a lot of solo reeds that can be used, try to use them and not always go to your default oboe in the swell. Try to, experiment with different solutions. Again, ask your teacher what he or she thinks would be best for a particular situation, so that you actually show what the organ has, the resources that the organ offers to you, and that you show that you can adjust to the instrument that you are going to perform on for the audition. And finally, once you have done all of that, make sure you calculate the total number of generals and divisionals that you're going to need, so that you know that you have enough. You don't want to arrive at your rehearsal and eventually run out of pistons, and then you have to readjust everything. One more thing that you should do in advance is check with the organizing committee or university whether you're going to have a page turner, and if there is a page turner, what that person is allowed to do. Is it only page turning or also stop changes? Is that person going to be present at the rehearsal and is allowed to tell you about balance? Is that person allowed to listen in the room and give you advice or not? Every university or competition has different rules on that. Just make sure you know in advance and be prepared for that. Again, you don't want to arrive and count on having someone to turn pages for you in your Bach prelude, and then it turns out there's no one there and you have to do it yourself. Now you have done all of that, you're prepared as well as one could possibly be. What should you do when you arrive for your rehearsal on the instrument to make sure you make the most with the limited time that you have? First thing you should do is check the position of the bench. Make sure you move it in a position that works well for you for your hands and feet at the beginning of your rehearsal. You don't want to spend 2 hours sitting in the wrong position and getting used to that, to this kind of awkward position, and then at the very end adjust to it. Again, muscle memory is very powerful, both in a good and negative way. If you get used to sitting in the wrong position and then change it at the end, your body will feel very weird once you start playing with that different position. What I like to do in order to remember that position is actually use my fingers to determine the height that I put the bench at, which is more reliable than looking at the numbers. Sometimes, depending on the angle you look at the numbers, they can be different. They can read differently. And for the distance from the console, I like to look at linings in the wood that you usually have under the bench that help you to find a spot to find the spot again that you put the bench at. Once you found the right bench position, you should set your stops as quickly as possible. What I recommend to do is check a couple of key passages. For example, check that the plenum is right, that it's not too top heavy or too muddy. If it's too top heavy, reduce a little bit on the mixtures or 2-foot stops that you have in there. If it's too muddy, take out some foundation stops or maybe add some more mixtures, because that's something you never know how the voicing of the organ really is, how the balance is, so you may have to adjust there. Another thing is solo stops. Make sure that the balance between solo and accompaniment is correct. Again, that is something it's easy to check that. And once you know it, you know that everything else you may have to adjust a little bit, bring out the accompaniment or reduce it a little bit. But you don't want to set all the stops and then find out that actually the accompaniment is always too loud and have to go through all of your pistons and bring it back down. Once you're done setting all your registrations, hopefully you will have quite a lot of time left to play through your repertoire. Personally, what I like to do is not play through every piece at full speed, but play through a couple of key passages, a little bit under tempo, and really focus on what is the whole console management to make sure that what I prepared in advance, the movements for manual changes, piston pushing, and swell shoe management, that all of that works, and to also get used to how exactly the swell shoe operates. Sometimes swell shoes are programmed in a way that they open a lot at the beginning, or the opposite, meaning at the beginning hardly anything happens and then all of a sudden they open a lot. And that's something you want to play with it a couple of times and adjust to whatever the situation is. In general, I like to tell myself that the instrument I'm performing on is the best in the world. Why? If you feel good about the instrument you're playing, the music you're playing on it, the sound in the room, it will help your own playing. If you are not happy with the instrument, if you focus on the defaults of the instrument, and wherever you play there will always be defaults, it will translate into your playing, because you focus on bad things and eventually your playing will unfortunately suffer as well. And that is something the jury can hear. Whereas if you have a positive attitude, it will on the other hand help your playing. You will feel really good about what you're doing, and hopefully there will also be something that the jury notices and they will place you higher than other competitors. I hope all of this will help you to prepare as best as possible for your upcoming audition. One thing that I would like you to keep in mind at all times, not just for these auditions or competitions, but throughout your entire career as an organist, is the example of Olivier Messiaen. As you probably know, Messiaen was very, very meticulous in what he indicated, in the registrations he indicated in his music. For every single part, for every single section, he wrote exactly what kind of stop combination he wanted you to use. Now, those were based on his instrument, La Trinité in Paris. Interestingly enough, Messiaen gave a lot of concerts all over the world, and every time he played a concert, he would use a fresh copy of his music and would write into the score the registration that he actually used on that particular instrument. And what we will see quite often is that he totally abandoned what he had indicated in his own score, because he found that another stop combination sounded much, much better. So what does that tell us? Keep an open mind. Listen to the instrument. Listen to what this particular organ wants to tell you, how you can make music on that instrument. Don't be set with what you have prepared. If you realize it really doesn't work, then try something else. Thanks so very much for watching. I hope that this will be helpful in the preparation of auditions or competitions or anything else in the course of your career. If you have questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to me. My contact information is in the description of the video and also on the screen right now. Thanks again, and good luck with your career.